Hi, in this video I'd like to demonstrate some enhancements to Illuminated Cloud support for execution of anonymous Apex and SOQL query scripts. This is functionality that's existed in the IDE since very early on. However, these enhancements should do two things. They should address some shortcomings that have been brought up by multiple users and additionally add some usability enhancements or quality of life enhancements around the execution and just working with these types of scripts. So let's take a look. So there are two tool windows if you're not familiar with them. There's Anonymous Apex and SOQL Query, and they support pretty much the full editor capabilities. So code completion, some levels of refactoring, things like that. So we'll just say foo, and we can go ahead and execute that, and it'll execute against the selected connection at the configured log level. And if we move over to the query editor, we can say that we want all account names and account numbers, and we can execute that and we can see that information. And this is a multi-tab interface as well, so I can create a new tab and I can switch to say another connection, and I can get all the users from this. So we'll just go ahead and get name and username and execute that, and we can see this information. And the same thing holds for the Anonymous Apex tool window. Now, one of the shortcomings, the primary one that has been brought up by users, is that while information from these tool windows is persisted across IDE sessions, it only persists the information for the first and default tab. And this has resulted in some understandable frustration because of loss of information when the project is closed and reopened, or perhaps the IDE crashes or the host OS crashes, whatever it happens to be. But loss of information is certainly not something I ever want to hear from a user. So with these enhancements, information about all of your tabs will be persisted across sessions. Additionally, you can now name your tabs. So let's just go ahead and name this one. So we can see that there's a rename action. It has a keyboard shortcut associated with it. So we'll just call this users from DF17. And then we'll go over here and we'll rename this and call this accounts from demo. And we'll go to the Anonymous Apex as well, and we'll rename this one foo. And let's go ahead and create another one. Let's first choose a different connection, and we'll choose a different logging level, and we'll say bar, and we'll go ahead and rename this one bar. We'll create yet another tab. We'll choose a scratch org to work against, yet another logging level, and of course you knew it was coming. This one will be Baz, and of course we can execute that, and it'll execute, and we'll rename that one Baz. Slight oversight on my part. And now if we close the project and if we reopen the project, we can see that everything was persisted. So we have foo, demo, full debugging, foo, bar, DF17 stepping with checkpoints, bar, Baz, scratch org, checkpoints only, Baz. And similarly, if we go to the SOQL query tool window, we can see we have accounts from demo and we have users from DF17. So that alone hopefully will address the main issue that has been logged by users around this functionality, which is not having all the tabs saved. So the nice thing that comes out of this is you can start to build your own scratch pad of frequently executed scripts. Now, while it's great to have these persisted along with the tool windows, very often you build up a library of these things and you check them into your version control system, things like that. So let's take a look. We have two queries and two Anonymous Apex scripts. These have respectively .soql, .soql, and .apex extensions on them, are recognized by the IDE first class. And now we can execute these very easily. So if we want to, for example, see what this query is, we can go to Illuminated Cloud and we can say open in SOQL Query Tool window, and it adds a new tab associated with that file. You can see that in the tooltip for the tab. And so we can actually make a modification to this. I'll show how this kind of round trips. We can make a modification to this here. We can save it here. You can see that the actual file in the file system was updated. Similarly, if we make a change here and say last modified by .username, and now I can use a code intention to do the same thing, but I can do it without having to reach for the mouse. And I can say execute this in SOQL Query. It'll reuse the tab. Notice the tab was updated with the latest contents of the file, and it actually executed that query. It's a great way to work with these scripts in the main editor and just send them to the tool window for purposes of execution and for perusing the output. Let's do something similar with one of these scripts. Again, you can right click and say Illuminated Cloud, say execute in Anonymous Apex tool window, and it executes. But additionally, from either location, I can say I want to debug, and I can send it there for debugging purposes. And now I can actually walk through the code in debug. And now you can see the call stack down here and the stack variables very clearly displayed. And I can swap back over to Anonymous Apex. You'll also notice that instead of opening this in a standalone Anonymous Apex tab, because it was started from Anonymous Apex, that it reopened the original source file. Now, if I made a change to this and didn't save this, and I executed this, it would actually open in a separate tab because it is no longer the exact same contents as that file, and debug line numbers may not align, things like that. So if I then close that, go back to Anonymous Apex, save this, we can see that this was updated, and I execute, you can see that it will reuse this tab. So just understand that when you're debugging something that is tied to a file, it will only debug within the context of that file's tab if the two match exactly in terms of the contents. All right, and those are the primary enhancements here. So support for persistence of multiple tabs in all of their settings, and the ability to quickly execute both Anonymous Apex scripts and queries from standalone files using either context menu actions or using code intentions, using just a keystroke, and be able to actually do each of the operations you would want. Open them, execute them, and in the case of Anonymous Apex, actually debug them. So I hope you find these enhancements useful. I hope they make the Anonymous Apex and SOQL Query tool windows even more valuable to you. And as always, if you find any issues, if there's anything else you think is missing, just don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope everyone is staying healthy.